I walked through the crowded hallway of Riverside High School, dodging around clusters of students who'd been friends since kindergarten. 3 weeks in this place, and I still felt like I was wearing a sign that said, "Outsider." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that harsh school lighting that made everyone look tired. Kids pushed past me without a second glance. Made sense, I guess. They had their groups, their routines, their inside jokes that went back years. I was just the new kid whose dad got transferred to work at the potash mine. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and teenage body spray. Someone had stuck gum under the water fountain again. The trophy case near the main office displayed photos of championship teams from the 80s, back when the school's colors were apparently different. Everything here had history I wasn't part of. I shifted my chemistry textbook to my other arm. Brody O'Connor's class had been brutal today. Pop quiz on molecular structures that I definitely bombed. At my old school in Regina, we'd covered that stuff last semester. Here, they were just getting to it. Nothing lined up the way it should. A group of girls walked past, talking about some party this weekend. One of them glanced at me, then whispered something to her friend. They both looked back and giggled. Great. Either I had something on my face or I'd already earned some kind of reputation. The warning bell rang. 5 minutes to get to my next class. I headed toward my locker, weaving through the crowd that moved with the practiced efficiency of people who knew exactly where they belonged. My locker was in the newer wing, past the art rooms where you could smell paint and clay even through the closed doors. The combination still felt foreign under my fingers. 27, 15, 31. Click. The metal door swung open with a squeak that needed WD-40. I grabbed my math textbook and shoved the chemistry book inside. The locker was pretty bare compared to most of the others around me. No photos taped to the door, no magnetic mirrors or little shelves full of junk, just textbooks and a spare sweatshirt in case the building's ancient heating system decided to quit again. Someone cleared their throat behind me. I turned around and found myself looking up at a tall senior in a Letterman jacket. Had to be at least 6'1", maybe more. Sandy hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it. The kind of build that said he played sports, but wasn't trying to prove anything about it. The name embroidered on his jacket read, Walsh. Carson Walsh. I'd seen him around, but we'd never talked. Seniors didn't usually waste time on juniors, especially new ones who hadn't proven they were worth knowing. You're Derek Jensen, right? His voice was quiet, almost like he didn't want anyone else to hear. Yeah. I closed my locker and faced him. That's me. He looked around the hallway, checking to see who might be listening. The crowd was thinning out as people headed to their next classes, but there were still plenty of students within earshot. Good. I've been meaning to catch you. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. Look, I know this is going to sound weird, but I need to give you something. I waited for him to continue. He seemed nervous, which was strange. What did a senior have to be nervous about when talking to a junior? Carson reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Not notebook paper. This looked like it had been torn from something else. The edges were rough, and the paper had that slightly yellowed look of something that had been handled a lot. Take this. He held it out to me. I looked at the paper, then back at his face. His eyes were serious in a way that made my stomach tighten. This wasn't some joke or prank. Whatever was on that paper mattered to him. What is it? Just take it, please. I reached out and took the paper. It felt heavier than it should have, like it was made of something more substantial than just wood pulp and ink. Carson glanced around again, then leaned closer. Read it when you get somewhere private. And Derek. He waited until I met his eyes. Follow every single rule on there. I don't care how stupid they sound. I don't care if you think it's all garbage. Follow them. The second warning bell rang. 2 minutes until classes started. Rules. I looked down at the folded paper in my hand. What kind of rules? The kind that keep you safe in this place. Carson's voice had an edge to it now, something that might have been fear. The kind that keep you coming back to school the next day. Before I could ask what that meant, he was already moving away from me, his long stride carrying him quickly down the hallway. I watched him disappear around the corner near the science labs, leaving me standing there with more questions than answers. The final bell rang. I was officially late for Philip Morse's math class. I shoved the paper into my jeans pocket and hurried down the hallway, my sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. Morse was already writing equations on the whiteboard when I slipped through the door. He gave me a look that said I'd used up my quota of grace period for being the new kid. I found an empty seat near the back and pulled out my notebook. But my mind wasn't on quadratic equations. The paper in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the denim. What kind of rules was Carson talking about? And what did he mean about coming back to school the next day? The class dragged on forever. Morse called on me twice, and I fumbled through answers that were probably wrong. The other students took notes and asked questions about homework assignments while I sat there thinking about the serious look in Carson's eyes. When the bell finally rang, I was the first one out the door. The hallway was emptying out as people headed to their after-school activities or caught buses home. I needed somewhere private to read whatever Carson had given me. The library was usually pretty quiet this time of day. I made my way through the main hallway, past the trophy case and the principal's office. Autumn Mejia, the librarian, was checking in returned books when I walked through the library doors. She smiled and nodded but didn't say anything. Perfect. I found a table in the back corner, behind the biography section where nobody ever went unless they were writing a report on dead presidents. The fluorescent light above me flickered occasionally, casting weird shadows across the table. I pulled the paper out of my pocket and unfolded it carefully. The creases were worn like it had been folded and unfolded many times before. At the top, in handwriting that was neat but urgent, someone had written, "Survival Rules for Riverside High." Below that were 5 numbered rules. 1. Never look in the mirror in the second-floor boys' bathroom near the gym. If you accidentally see something that isn't your reflection, don't react. Walk out calmly and avoid that bathroom for the rest of the week. 2. If the lights in the library start flickering in a pattern, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, don't leave. Stay exactly where you are until they stop. The librarian will understand. 3. Don't ride bus number 47 if Billy Oliver is driving. Billy died in 1997. If you see him behind the wheel, take a different bus or walk home. 4. The portrait of Principal Hawthorne in the main hallway was painted in 1963, 2 years after he died in his office. Don't stare at it for more than a few seconds. His eyes follow you for a reason. 5. If the floor lights in any hallway start blinking in sequence, run to the nearest classroom immediately. Don't look back, don't stop to help anyone else, just run. I read through the list twice, then a third time. Each rule was more ridiculous than the last. Dead bus drivers, haunted mirrors, portrait eyes that followed you around. This had to be some kind of elaborate prank. Maybe it was a tradition to mess with new students, give them fake ghost stories to make them paranoid. Carson had seemed so serious, but that was probably part of the act. I looked around the library. Everything seemed normal. Students at computers, someone studying for a test, the soft sound of pages turning. No flickering lights, no mysterious phenomena. Just a regular high school library on a regular Tuesday afternoon. But then I remembered the look in Carson's eyes. That hadn't been the look of someone playing a prank. That had been genuine fear. I folded the paper back up and stuck it in my pocket. Maybe I'd ask around, see if anyone else had gotten a similar list. Or maybe I'd just forget about it and focus on trying to fit in at this place. The library was getting quieter as more students left for the day. I packed up my stuff and headed for the exit, nodding to Autumn on my way out. The main hallway was mostly empty now. My footsteps echoed off the polished floor as I walked toward the exit. I passed the trophy case, the principal's office, And then I stopped in front of the portrait Carson had mentioned. Principal Hawthorne, according to the small plaque at the bottom of the frame. A stern-looking man in a suit that screamed 1960s. His hair was perfectly combed, his expression serious but not unkind. I stared at the painting for a few seconds, waiting to see if the eyes would move. They didn't, of course. It was just a regular portrait of a dead principal, the kind of thing you'd find in any old school. But as I started to walk away, I could have sworn I felt something watching me. I shook my head and kept walking. Carson had gotten into my head with his stupid list. Now I was jumping at shadows and imagining things that weren't there. The autumn air hit me as I pushed through the main doors. My dad wouldn't be home from the mine for another hour, and my mom was working late at her new job. I had time to walk home and think about whether I wanted to take any of this seriously. The paper crinkled in my pocket as I walked. 5 rules that sounded like something out of a bad horror movie. A senior who acted like breaking them was a matter of life and death. I thought about Carson's final words. The kind that keep you coming back to school the next day. What was that supposed to mean? Students didn't just disappear from school. If something happened to them, people would notice. Parents would ask questions. There would be investigations. But then again, I was new here. I didn't know the school's history, didn't know what might have happened in the past. Maybe there were things about Riverside High that the administration didn't advertise in their welcome packets. I turned onto my street, a quiet row of houses that all looked basically the same. Ours was the third one from the corner, with the blue mailbox and the small garden my mom was trying to establish before winter set in. The house was empty, just like I'd expected. I dropped my backpack by the front door and went to the kitchen to grab a snack. The paper sat in my pocket like a weight, demanding attention I wasn't sure I wanted to give it. Finally, I pulled it out and read through the rules one more time. They were crazy. All of them. The kind of thing you'd expect from urban legends or internet horror stories, not from a real high school in Saskatoon. But Carson had been so serious, so scared. I thought about his words again. Follow every single rule on there. I don't care how stupid they sound. Maybe that was the point. Maybe the rules were supposed to sound stupid. Maybe that's what made them effective. People would break them because they seemed ridiculous, and then what? I folded the paper up and stuck it back in my pocket. Tomorrow I'd pay more attention, see if I noticed anything unusual about the places and situations the rules mentioned, not because I believed in ghost stories, but because Carson had seemed genuinely worried about my safety. It couldn't hurt to be careful, and if nothing happened, if everything turned out to be normal, then I'd know it was all just an elaborate prank designed to make the new kid paranoid. But something told me it wasn't going to be that simple. I grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl and headed upstairs to start on homework. The paper crinkled softly in my pocket with each step, reminding me that tomorrow I'd find out whether Carson Walsh was trying to help me or just messing with my head. Either way, I had a feeling my time at Riverside High was about to get a lot more interesting. 2 days had passed since Carson handed me that piece of paper. I'd been watching everything, waiting for something weird to happen. But the school felt normal. Students complained about tests, teachers assigned homework, and the vending machine on the second floor still ate people's quarters. Maybe Carson was just messing with me after all. I walked out of biology class thinking about the quiz we'd just taken on cellular respiration. Brody had covered that stuff back in Regina, so I actually felt good about it for once. The hallway buzzed with the usual noise of students switching classes. Someone dropped their binder and papers scattered across the floor. A group of sophomores laughed about something near the water fountain. I needed to use the bathroom before my next class. The closest one was on the second floor, but I remembered Carson's first rule. Never look in the second floor boys' bathroom mirror near the gym. The warning echoed in my head as I climbed the stairs to the third floor instead. The third floor bathroom was smaller than the one downstairs. 3 stalls, 2 urinals, and a row of sinks under a long mirror that ran the length of the wall. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting that harsh white glow that made everyone look sick. I was alone in there, which was fine by me. The bathroom smelled like industrial soap and something else I couldn't identify. Something stale and unpleasant. I used the middle stall and washed my hands afterward, pumping the soap dispenser twice to get enough foam. The water was cold. I rubbed my hands together under the stream, working up a lather. That's when I made the mistake. I looked up at the mirror. My reflection stared back at me. Same brown hair, same green eyes, same face I'd seen every morning for 16 years. But something was wrong with it. The color was off. My skin looked pale, almost gray, like I'd been sick for weeks. Dark circles shadowed my eyes and my cheeks seemed hollow. I blinked hard and looked again. The reflection was still there. Still wrong. Still that sickly version of myself. But now it was doing something I wasn't doing. It was grinning. I wasn't smiling. My mouth was closed, maybe slightly open in confusion, but definitely not grinning. The thing in the mirror had my lips pulled back in this wide, unsettling smile that showed too many teeth. The expression didn't match anything I was feeling. It looked hungry. My hands froze under the running water. I couldn't move, couldn't look away. The reflection kept grinning at me with that horrible expression. Then it tilted its head. I wasn't tilting my head. I was standing perfectly still, gripping the edge of the sink so hard my knuckles went white. But the reflection moved independently, cocking its head to one side like it was studying me. Like I was the reflection, and it was the real person. The grinning reflection raised one hand. I watched in horror as it brought its finger to its eye and winked at me. That broke whatever spell had frozen me in place. I stumbled backward, my wet hands slipping on the sink edge. Water splashed onto my shirt and the floor. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might burst. The reflection's grin seemed to widen as I backed away from the mirror. I turned and ran. My footsteps echoed off the bathroom tiles as I bolted for the door. I hit it with my shoulder, shoving it open so hard it banged against the wall outside. Students in the hallway turned to stare as I emerged, breathing hard and dripping water from my hands. "You okay?" some girl asked, but I didn't stop to answer. I walked fast down the hallway, leaving a trail of water drops behind me. My hands were still soaking wet, but I didn't care. I wasn't going back in there to dry them. A few people gave me strange looks as I passed. One guy pointed at the wet spots I was leaving on the floor and said something to his friend that made them both laugh. I didn't care about that either. My next class was American History with Mrs. Patterson. I slipped into my usual seat near the back just as the bell rang. Mrs. Patterson started talking about the Revolutionary War, but I couldn't focus on anything she said. All I could think about was that grin, that wrong, hungry grin that belonged to my face but wasn't mine. "Derek," Mrs. Patterson's voice cut through my thoughts. "Can you tell us about the Boston Tea Party?" I looked up. The whole class was staring at me. "Sorry, what?" "The Boston Tea Party. We were discussing acts of colonial rebellion." "Right. I tried to pull together what I remembered from previous schools. The colonists dumped tea into Boston Harbor to protest taxes. That's correct, though I'd appreciate it if you paid attention." "Yes, ma'am." She went back to her lecture, but I caught a few students still looking at me. Great. The new kid was becoming the weird kid. I wiped my palms on my jeans, but they were still damp. The rest of the class dragged by. Mrs. Patterson talked about taxation without representation, while I kept thinking about that reflection. Had I imagined it? Maybe the fluorescent lights in the bathroom had created some kind of optical illusion. Maybe I'd been more stressed about fitting in at this school than I'd realized. But I knew what I'd seen. That thing in the mirror had moved independently. It had winked at me. When the final bell rang, I packed up my stuff and headed for my locker. The hallways filled with students eager to get home. I spun my combination and grabbed my jacket, then walked toward the exit with everyone else. The October air felt good after being inside all day. I took a deep breath and started the walk home. My house was only about 10 blocks from school, through a neighborhood of older homes with big yards and mature trees. Most of the leaves had turned yellow and orange by now. Some had already fallen, crunching under my feet as I walked. I tried to focus on normal things, the sound of my footsteps on the sidewalk, a dog barking somewhere nearby, the smell of someone burning leaves in their backyard, anything except what had happened in that bathroom. But it didn't work. Every few steps, I'd remember that grin. The way the reflection had tilted its head like it was alive, like it was thinking. By the time I got home, my hands had finally dried. I unlocked the front door and went inside. The house was quiet. Mom wouldn't be home from the clinic for another hour, and Dad's shift at the mine didn't end until 6. I dropped my backpack by the door and went to the kitchen. I was thirsty after that walk, so I filled a glass with water and drank half of it in one go. My hands were steady now, but I could still feel my heart beating faster than normal. I needed to look at that paper again. I went upstairs to my room and closed the door behind me. My backpack was still downstairs, but I'd moved Carson's list to my desk drawer after reading it that first night. I pulled the drawer open and took out the yellowed paper. The rules looked the same as before, written in that careful handwriting. But now the first one seemed different, more real. Never look in the second-floor boys' bathroom mirror near the gym. If you see something that isn't your reflection, walk out calmly and avoid the bathroom for a week. I'd used the third-floor bathroom, not the second floor. But maybe the rule applied to all the mirrors in the school. Maybe Carson had just been specific about the second floor because that's where he'd encountered whatever I'd just seen. I read the rule again. If you see something that isn't your reflection. That's exactly what had happened. The face looking back at me had been mine, but not mine. Wrong in ways I couldn't fully explain. Walk out calmly and avoid the bathroom for a week. I hadn't walked out calmly. I'd run like something was chasing me. But at least I'd gotten out. And I definitely planned to avoid that bathroom. Maybe all the bathrooms, just to be safe. I folded the paper and put it back in the drawer. Then I sat on my bed and stared at the wall, trying to process what had happened. 3 days ago, I thought Carson Walsh was either pranking me or maybe dealing with some kind of mental health issue. The rules had seemed like elaborate nonsense designed to make the new kid paranoid, but now I knew better. Something was wrong with Riverside High School. Something that made reflections act independently and grin with expressions you weren't making. I thought about the other rules on Carson's list. The library lights flickering in a pattern. Bus 47 with a driver who died in 1997. Principal Hawthorne's portrait with eyes that followed you. Floor lights blinking in sequence. If the first rule was real, then maybe they all were. I lay back on my bed and closed my eyes, but immediately saw that grin again. Those were my teeth, my lips, but the expression belonged to something else. Something that had been watching me from inside the mirror. The image of that wrong reflection wouldn't leave me alone. Even with my eyes closed, I could see it tilting its head and winking at me with my own face. I spent the next week avoiding bathrooms entirely. Held it through classes, went home at lunch, made excuses to leave early when I could. The other kids probably thought I had some kind of medical problem, but that was better than seeing that grin again. By Friday, I'd almost convinced myself it was stress. New school, new town. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. But then I'd remember how real it felt, how wrong that reflection looked, and I knew I wasn't losing my mind. The following Monday, I had a history project due for Mrs. Patterson. Something about Saskatchewan's early settlements. I'd been putting it off all weekend, so after classes ended, I headed to the library to knock it out. The school emptied fast on Mondays. Most kids caught their buses or rides home right after the final bell. The library was quiet, except for the hum of computers and the soft sounds of Mrs. Mejia checking in returned books at the front desk. I'd learned her first name was Autumn from her nameplate. She was probably in her 40s, with graying brown hair pulled back in a neat bun and wire-rimmed glasses that made her look like every librarian in every movie ever made. "Working late today, Derek?" she asked when I walked past her desk. "History project," I said, holding up my notebook. "Should have started it earlier." She smiled. The good students always say that. The ones who really should have started earlier never do. I found a table in the back corner, behind the biography section where it was quieter. The fluorescent light above my table flickered occasionally, but not in any pattern. Just the normal dying bulb kind of flicker that happened in old buildings. I spread out my materials and got to work. The project was supposed to cover the early European settlements in Saskatchewan, focusing on the challenges they faced. Pretty straightforward stuff. I had 3 books checked out and was making decent progress when I heard Mrs. Mejia gathering her things at the front desk. "I'm heading out, Derek," she called. "You can stay until 6, but make sure the door locks behind you when you leave." "Thanks, Mrs. Mejia." The main library door closed with a soft thud, and then I was alone. The building felt different without her there. Bigger somehow. The heating system made settling noises, and I could hear the faint buzz of the vending machines in the hallway. I kept writing. The early settlers had dealt with harsh winters, crop failures, isolation. Reading about their struggles made my problems seem pretty small. So, what if I'd seen something weird in a mirror? At least I wasn't trying to survive a prairie winter in a sod house. At exactly 5:15, the lights started flickering. Not the random flicker of a dying bulb. This was deliberate. 3 short flashes, then 3 long ones, then 3 short again. The pattern repeated twice before I remembered the second rule. If library lights flicker in a pattern, stay exactly where you are until they stop. My hand froze over my notebook. The lights kept going. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Over and over. The rhythm was hypnotic, almost like a heartbeat, but wrong somehow. Too measured, too precise. I wanted to pack up and leave. Every instinct told me to get out of there. But Carson's voice echoed in my head. Follow every rule, no matter how stupid they sound. So I stayed put. The flickering made it hard to read. The text on the page kept jumping between light and shadow. I set down my pen and waited, watching the lights pulse above me. The pattern never changed. Always the same sequence, with the same timing between flashes. That's when I heard the voice. "Derek! Derek Jensen!" Someone was calling my name from outside. I looked toward the windows that faced the parking lot. A figure stood near the flagpole waving at me. Even through the glass, I could tell it was Mr. O'Connor. My chemistry teacher was still at school at 5:20 on a Monday evening, standing in the parking lot and calling my name. That was weird enough on its own, but something about the way he moved made my skin crawl. His arm went up and down in a waving motion, but it was too stiff, too mechanical, like someone had wound up a toy and set it going. His smile was visible even from this distance, stretched wide across his face. I stayed in my seat. The lights kept flickering overhead. Mr. O'Connor took a few steps closer to the building, still waving, still calling my name, though I couldn't hear the words through the glass anymore. Just the rise and fall of his voice, muffled and distorted. Then his eyes found mine through the window. I don't know how I could tell from that distance, but I knew he was looking right at me. His head turned with the same mechanical precision as his waving arm, swiveling until he faced my exact location, and then he stopped moving everything except his mouth. His eyes were opened too wide. Even from the parking lot, I could see white all around his irises. Not the normal amount of white you see when someone's surprised or scared. This was like someone had pried his eyelids open and forgotten to let them close. He kept smiling that too wide smile and staring with those too wide eyes. His mouth moved like he was still calling my name, but his body had gone completely still. No more waving, no more walking, just that horrible stare. I gripped the edge of the table. My notebook lay open in front of me, but I couldn't look away from the window. Mr. O'Connor's head tilted to one side, farther than any human head should tilt. The angle was all wrong, like his neck had extra joints. The lights kept flickering. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Mr. O'Connor's eyes never blinked. I watched for what felt like 10 minutes, and he never blinked once. The white around his irises seemed to glow in the parking lot lights. His head stayed tilted at that impossible angle. My hands started shaking. I wanted to run, to pack up my stuff and get out of there, but the rule was clear. Stay exactly where you are until the lights stop. So I sat there and let Mr. O'Connor stare at me through the window while the fluorescent lights pulsed overhead and my heart hammered in my chest. The staring contest went on forever. Or maybe it was only a few minutes. Time moved differently when something was watching you with eyes that didn't blink and a neck that bent the wrong way. Then, between one flash and the next, the lights stopped flickering. The library went back to normal fluorescent lighting, steady and bright and ordinary. I looked toward the window, expecting to see Mr. O'Connor still standing there with his tilted head and wide open eyes. The parking lot was empty. I blinked and looked again. Nothing. Just empty asphalt and the flagpole and a few cars parked near the street. No sign that anyone had been there at all. I packed up my stuff with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, shoved my books and notebook into my backpack and headed for the exit. The library felt normal again, but I didn't trust it. I wanted to get out of there before anything else decided to start flickering. The next morning, I walked into chemistry class expecting... I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe for Mr. O'Connor to acknowledge what had happened. Maybe for him to look at me differently. But he was just Mr. O'Connor. Same brown hair, same clean-shaven face, same button-down shirt and slacks. He greeted the class the way he always did, and started the lesson on chemical bonds like nothing had happened. When he called on me to answer a question about ionic compounds, his eyes looked completely normal, the right amount of white around brown irises. No mechanical movements, no impossible head tilting. Derek, can you tell us what happens when sodium and chlorine bond? They form sodium chloride, I said. Table salt. Correct. And why does this happen? I gave him the textbook answer about electron transfer and opposite charges attracting. He nodded and moved on to the next student. No recognition. No hint that he'd been standing in a parking lot the night before, staring at me through a library window with eyes that never blinked. After class, I watched him erase the whiteboard and organize his papers. Everything about him was normal, professional, human. But I knew what I'd seen. And I knew Carson's rules were the only thing keeping me safe in this place. I sat through lunch thinking about Mr. O'Connor's eyes in that parking lot, how they'd stayed open too wide, never blinking, how his head had turned at that impossible angle. 3 days passed, normal days, or what counted as normal at Riverside High. I went to classes, took notes, avoided the bathrooms, kept Carson's rules folded in my backpack now instead of my desk drawer. Easier to check them when I needed to. Thursday afternoon, I was packing up my locker when I heard the first bus engine start outside, then the second. I grabbed my jacket and ran. The hallway was mostly empty. A few kids at their lockers, but most had already headed out. I pushed through the main doors and saw the last of the regular buses pulling away from the curb, students walking toward cars in the parking lot. The usual after-school rush was over. I checked my watch. 3:28. My bus left at 3:25. Damn it. I'd stayed too long organizing my locker, spent too much time thinking about which textbooks I actually needed for homework. Now I was stuck. The nearest bus stop was about a quarter-mile down the road. Sometimes the city buses ran late. Maybe I could catch the 4:15 route that went near my neighborhood, but that meant waiting almost an hour in the cold. I started walking toward the street when I heard another engine. A school bus was coming around the corner, yellow and black with the familiar Riverside High logo on the side. The destination sign on the front was too far away to read clearly. The bus slowed as it approached the school. I could see the driver through the windshield. Gray hair, thin build, blue uniform shirt. I ran toward the curb as the bus pulled up. The doors opened with a hydraulic hiss. The driver looked familiar. Something about the way he sat, perfectly straight in his seat, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel at exactly 10 and 2. I climbed the first step and looked at the route number above the windshield. Bus 47. My stomach dropped. Carson's third rule. Don't ride bus 47 if Billy Oliver is driving. Billy died in 1997. I looked at the driver's name tag. Billy Oliver. But this was the last bus of the day. If I didn't take it, I'd have to walk 5 miles home in 30-degree weather. My parents wouldn't be home until after 6. No one to call for a ride. I stood on the step, holding the rail. The driver didn't look at me, didn't ask to see my student pass, just stared straight ahead through the windshield. "You getting on or not?" Someone called from inside the bus. I turned around. A few other students were already seated. They all faced forward, hands in their laps. None of them were talking. The cold air was coming through my jacket. My breath made small clouds in front of my face. 5 miles was a long walk. I climbed the rest of the way up and showed my student pass to the driver. He didn't acknowledge it, didn't nod or grunt or even glance in my direction. Just kept staring ahead. The doors closed behind me. I walked down the aisle looking for a seat. The other passengers sat perfectly still. A girl with blonde hair in the third row, a boy with a hockey jacket in the middle section, an older student near the back wearing headphones. None of them moved. None of them looked out the windows or checked their phones or did any of the normal things people do on buses. They just sat there, hands folded, staring at the seat backs in front of them. I chose an empty row about halfway back and sat down. The seat was cold vinyl, cracked in a few places with yellow foam showing through. I put my backpack on the floor and looked around again. The girl with blonde hair hadn't blinked once since I'd gotten on. Her eyes were open, focused on something I couldn't see. The boy in the hockey jacket was the same way, completely motionless. The bus lurched forward and pulled away from the school. I grabbed the seat in front of me to keep from sliding sideways. None of the other passengers moved at all, even when we hit a pothole that made the whole bus bounce. I looked toward the front. Billy Oliver sat exactly as he had when I'd gotten on. Same posture, same grip on the wheel. I couldn't see his face in the rearview mirror. The angle was wrong, or maybe he'd adjusted it somehow. We turned left onto Main Street. This wasn't the usual route. My bus normally went straight for about 2 miles, then turned right toward the residential area where I lived. But we were heading downtown instead. I stood up and walked toward the front of the bus. "Excuse me, this isn't the right route." Billy Oliver didn't respond, didn't turn his head or adjust his mirrors or give any sign that he'd heard me. "Hey," I spoke louder. "You're going the wrong way." Nothing. I looked back at the other passengers. They were all still sitting in exactly the same positions. The girl with blonde hair, the boy in the hockey jacket, the student with headphones. None of them seemed concerned about the route change. The bus turned right onto a street I didn't recognize. Old houses with peeling paint and overgrown yards. Some of the windows were boarded up. I'd never been in this part of town before. "Where are we going?" I asked the girl with blonde hair. She didn't answer, didn't even look at me, just kept staring straight ahead with those unblinking eyes. I tried the boy in the hockey jacket. "Do you know where this bus is supposed to go?" Same thing. No response, no movement. Like he couldn't hear me at all. The bus slowed down and turned into what looked like an abandoned parking lot. Cracked asphalt with weeds growing through it. A chain-link fence around the perimeter. No other vehicles anywhere. Billy Oliver brought the bus to a stop and turned off the engine. The sudden silence was complete. No traffic sounds, no wind, no normal city noise. Just quiet. I walked back to the front. This isn't a bus stop. Why are we here? Billy Oliver sat motionless. His hands were still on the steering wheel. I could see the side of his face now, and his skin looked gray. Not pale, but actually gray, like old concrete. Behind me, someone giggled. I turned around. All the passengers were exactly as they'd been before. Sitting straight, hands folded, staring ahead. But one of them had made that sound. The giggle came again. Soft and high-pitched, almost childlike. I walked down the aisle, checking each passenger as I passed. The girl with blonde hair showed no expression. The boy in the hockey jacket was the same. None of them looked like they'd made any sound at all. The giggling got louder as I moved toward the back of the bus. In the last row, a boy about my age sat by the window. He wore a Riverside High uniform, the same navy blue sweater and khaki pants that were required for underclassmen. His dark hair was neatly combed. His hands were folded in his lap just like all the others, but his skull was split open. A crack ran from his forehead all the way to the back of his head, dividing his skull into two halves. The edges of the crack were jagged, like broken pottery. Inside, where his brain should have been, there was nothing, just dark, empty space. He was smiling and giggling. "Hi," he said, turning to look at me with eyes that were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just solid black from edge to edge. "Want to sit with me?" I backed away from him, bumping into the seat across the aisle. No, I need to get off." "But we just got here." His smile got wider, showing teeth that were too sharp. "Don't you want to see where we're going?" The giggling was coming from his open skull now, echoing from inside that empty space where his brain used to be. I ran toward the front of the bus. "Let me off! Open the doors!" Billy Oliver didn't move, didn't even turn his head. I pounded on the door with both fists. "Open it! Let me out!" The boy in the back row giggled louder. Then the girl with blonde hair started laughing too, a sound like breaking glass. The boy in the hockey jacket joined in, and the student with headphones. All of them were laughing now, but none of them had moved. They still sat perfectly straight, hands folded, staring ahead. The laughter was coming from their mouths, but their faces showed no expression at all. I grabbed the emergency door release handle and pulled it down as hard as I could. An alarm started beeping, loud and sharp. The doors opened with a mechanical grinding sound. The bus was moving again. When had that happened? I hadn't felt it start. Hadn't heard the engine, but we were definitely moving. Trees and houses were sliding past the windows. I didn't care. I jumped. I hit the pavement hard, my backpack flying off my shoulder. My hands scraped against the asphalt as I tried to break my fall. Pain shot through both knees where they struck the ground. I rolled twice and came to a stop in the dead grass beside the road. My palms were bleeding. My jeans were torn at both knees, but I was off the bus. I looked up and saw Bus 47 disappearing around a corner. The emergency alarm was still beeping, getting fainter as it moved away. In a few seconds, it was gone completely. I sat on the ground and looked at my hands. The cuts weren't deep, but they stung. My knees hurt worse. I could feel blood soaking through the torn fabric of my jeans. But I was alive, and I was off that bus. I stood up slowly, testing my legs. Everything worked. I picked up my backpack and checked the contents. My textbooks were still there, along with Carson's folded rules. I pulled out the paper and read the third rule again. I made it to the front porch before my legs gave out completely. The adrenaline was wearing off and everything hurt worse now. My hands were still bleeding and my knees felt like someone had taken sandpaper to them. The front door opened before I could even reach for my keys. "Derek?" Mom stepped out onto the porch, still wearing her scrubs from the clinic. "What happened to you?" I looked down at myself. My jeans were torn at both knees, dark stains spreading through the fabric. My hands had dirt mixed with the blood from where I'd hit the pavement. My jacket was scuffed up on one side. "I fell," I said, "running for the bus." It wasn't exactly a lie. I had been running and I definitely fell, just not the way she'd picture it. Mom helped me inside, her arm around my shoulders. "Let's get you cleaned up, Rowan," she called toward the kitchen. "Derek's hurt." Dad appeared in the hallway, still in his work clothes from the mine. Dust clung to his flannel shirt and his hands were stained with the kind of dirt that never really comes out. He took one look at me and frowned. "What the hell happened?" "He fell running for the bus," Mom said, guiding me toward the bathroom. "Help me get the first aid kit." I sat on the edge of the bathtub while Mom filled a bowl with warm water. Dad brought the white plastic box from the medicine cabinet and set it on the counter. "This is going to sting," Mom said, dipping a washcloth in the water. She started with my hands, cleaning away the dirt and blood. The cuts weren't as bad as they'd looked. Just scrapes, really. But they burned when the water hit them. "How'd you fall this hard?" Dad asked. He was leaning against the door frame, arms crossed. "You trip over something?" "I was running and I slipped," I said. "Hit the pavement pretty hard." Mom moved to my knees, cutting away the torn fabric with scissors. The scrapes there were worse, deeper. Little pieces of gravel were embedded in the skin. "This might need stitches," she said, examining my left knee. "It's fine," I said quickly. "Just clean it up." She gave me a look, but didn't argue. Mom picked out the gravel with tweezers, piece by piece. Each one felt like a tiny knife going in reverse. "So, you missed the bus then?" Dad asked. "Yeah, had to walk home." "That's 5 miles, Derek." "I know." Dad was quiet for a minute, watching Mom work. "I'm calling the school. If their bus left early, they need to know about it." My stomach dropped. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do. What if this happens to another kid? What if they get hurt worse than you did?" Mom finished cleaning my knees and started applying antibiotic ointment. "He's right, honey. The school needs to know." I wanted to tell them not to call, that there wouldn't be any record of Bus 47, that Billy Oliver had been dead for over 20 years, that the transportation office would have no idea what they were talking about. But I couldn't say any of that without sounding crazy. Dad left the bathroom and I heard him dialing the phone in the kitchen. His voice carried down the hallway, professional and direct. "Yes, this is Rowan Jensen. My son Derek is a student there." "No, he's fine, but he was injured trying to catch the bus this afternoon." Mom finished bandaging my knees and moved back to my hands. She wrapped gauze around my palms and taped it down. "There," she said. "That should help them heal properly." "Thanks, Mom." She kissed the top of my head. "Next time, don't run so fast. The bus isn't worth getting hurt over." If only she knew. Dad came back a few minutes later, his expression puzzled. "Well, that was strange," he said. "What do you mean?" Mom asked. "They said Bus 47 wasn't running this afternoon. According to their records, it's been out of service all week for maintenance." Mom looked confused. "But Derek said—" "I know what he said. But the transportation office insists that bus wasn't operating today." They both looked at me. I could feel the weight of their stares, waiting for an explanation I couldn't give. "Maybe I got the number wrong," I said. "I just saw a school bus and got on." "All the buses have their numbers painted on the side," Dad said. "Pretty hard to miss." I was in a hurry. Maybe I misread it. Dad didn't look convinced, but he didn't push it either. "Well, regardless, I told them what happened. They're going to look into it. Good luck with that, I thought. The next week passed without incident. I went to classes, took notes, avoided bathrooms, and stayed alert for any signs of the rules coming into play. Every time I saw Mr. O'Connor in the hallway, I watched his movements carefully, but he seemed completely normal, human. I started to wonder if maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. The bus, Billy Oliver, the other passengers. Maybe the stress of the new school had finally gotten to me. Maybe I'd had some kind of breakdown and created the whole scenario in my head. But then I'd remember the boy in the back row, the crack in his skull, the empty space where his brain should have been. That hadn't been my imagination. On Wednesday morning, I was walking to English class when I passed the portrait hanging on the second-floor wall near the main staircase. I'd walked past it dozens of times since starting at Riverside High. It was just part of the background, like the trophy cases and the bulletin boards, but this time, something made me stop. The nameplate below the frame read, Principal William Blackwood, 1961-1963. The painting showed a man in his 50s with gray hair and a stern expression. He wore a dark suit and tie, and his hands were folded on a desk in front of him. I'd never really looked at it before, just glanced at it in passing, but now I found myself staring directly at it. The painted eyes seemed to be looking right at me, not in the vague way that portraits sometimes seem to follow you around a room. This was different, more focused, like he was actually seeing me. I took a step to the left. The eyes followed. A step to the right. They tracked my movement. Derek Jensen. The voice was barely a whisper, so quiet I almost missed it. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the portrait. I leaned closer. Derek Jensen, the voice said again. Come here. The painted mouth wasn't moving. At least I didn't think it was. But the whispers were definitely coming from the portrait. Derek Jensen, come closer. Other students were walking past in the hallway, heading to their classes. None of them seemed to hear anything. They didn't even glance at the portrait. Derek Jensen, listen to me. The whispers were getting more insistent. I could almost make out other words underneath, like multiple voices speaking at once. But I couldn't understand what they were saying. The painted mouth twitched. Just slightly. So small I might have imagined it. But I was staring right at it, and I could swear the lips moved. Derek Jensen, stay here. Listen. My feet felt rooted to the floor. I wanted to walk away, to get to English class before the bell rang. But something was holding me in place. The whispers grew louder. Not louder in volume, but more urgent, more demanding. Derek Jensen, look at me. Only me. The painted eyes were definitely moving now. They blinked once, slowly, and when they opened again, they seemed darker, more alive. Derek Jensen. I forced myself to look away. It took everything I had, like tearing my eyes away from a magnet. But I managed to turn my head and focus on the trophy case across the hallway. The whispers continued behind me, but they sounded frustrated now, angry. I made my legs move, one step, then another. Down the hallway toward Mrs. Patterson's classroom. The whispers followed me for about 10 feet, then faded. I slipped into English class just as the bell rang. Mrs. Patterson was already at the front of the room, opening her copy of the textbook. Today we're discussing symbolism in The Great Gatsby, she said. Who can give me an example of how Fitzgerald uses color to represent different themes? A girl in the front row raised her hand. The green light represents hope and the American dream. Excellent. What about the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg? I tried to focus on the discussion, but I could still hear the whispers in my head. Not the actual words, but the memory of them. The way they'd said my name over and over. Derek Jensen, come here. Listen to me. Mr. Jensen? I looked up. Mrs. Patterson was staring at me, along with the rest of the class. "I asked you a question about the symbolism of the Valley of Ashes." "Sorry," I said. "Could you repeat it?" She frowned but repeated the question. I gave some generic answer about the moral wasteland of society. It seemed to satisfy her. But for the rest of the period, I could still hear those whispers echoing in my mind. They grew fainter as the minutes passed, but they didn't disappear completely. By the time class ended, they were just a distant murmur, like voices from another room. I packed up my books and headed for the door. In the hallway, I glanced back toward the portrait of Principal Blackwood. He looked normal again, just paint on canvas. His eyes stared straight ahead at nothing in particular, but I knew what I'd heard, what I'd seen. I pulled Carson's rules out of my backpack and unfolded them. Rule number 4. Don't stare at Principal Hawthorne's portrait in the main hallway for more than a few seconds. His eyes follow you. The name was wrong. The portrait said William Blackwood, not Hawthorne. But everything else matched. I folded the paper and put it back in my backpack. That made 4 rules I'd now experienced firsthand: the bathroom mirror, the library lights, bus 47, and now the portrait. Only 1 rule left. 2 weeks passed without anything happening. I went to classes, took notes, ate lunch in the cafeteria. The rules stayed folded in my backpack, but I didn't need to check them anymore. I had them memorized. I kept thinking about what Carson had said when he gave me the paper, that the rules keep you safe, that they keep you coming back to school the next day. 4 rules down, and I was still here, still coming back. The weather got colder. November in Saskatchewan meant frost on the windows and everyone wearing heavy coats. I walked through the hallways, watching other students complain about upcoming tests and weekend plans, normal stuff, high school stuff. I started to wonder if maybe the worst was over. Maybe experiencing 4 out of 5 rules was enough. Maybe the 5th one wouldn't happen. That was stupid thinking, and I knew it. Thursday after lunch, I walked toward my locker to grab my history textbook. The main hallway was busy with students heading to afternoon classes. Someone laughed behind me. Locker doors slammed, the usual sounds. I was thinking about Mrs. Patterson's assignment on the French and Indian War when I noticed something wrong with the floor. The lights embedded in the hallway floor were blinking, not the overhead fluorescents. The small rectangular lights built into the floor along the edges, the ones that usually stayed on steady to help people see where they were walking. Those lights were flashing in a pattern. One light blinked near the main entrance, then the next one in line, then the next. Like dominoes falling, but with light instead of sound. The pattern moved down the hallway toward where I stood. I stopped walking. Other students moved around me, heading to their classes. Nobody else seemed to notice the lights. The blinking continued. Each light flashed once, then went dark. Then the next light in sequence did the same thing. It created a path. A trail leading from where I stood toward the main entrance. My stomach dropped. Rule number 5. If floor lights in any hallway blink in sequence, run to the nearest classroom immediately. Don't look back. Don't help others. I turned and ran. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Heavy ones. Not the quick steps of students hurrying to class. These were deliberate, measured, and they were following me. The footsteps matched my pace exactly. When I ran faster, they got faster. When I dodged around a group of sophomores near the water fountain, the footsteps followed the same path. I didn't look back. The rule said don't look back, and I'd learned to follow the rules exactly. The nearest classroom was Mr. Morse's math room. The door was about 30 feet away. I could see it was open, which meant he might be inside preparing for his next class. The footsteps behind me were getting closer, not just matching my pace anymore, gaining ground. I sprinted the last 15 feet and threw myself through the doorway. My shoulder hit the door frame and I stumbled, catching myself on one of the desks in the front row. Mr. Morse looked up from his papers. "Derek, what's wrong?" I spun around and slammed the door shut. The handle turned easily and I heard the lock click into place. "Derek?" Mr. Morse stood up. "Are you okay?" The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I pressed my back against the wood and held my breath. Mr. Morse walked over, his face concerned. "What happened out there?" he asked. I couldn't tell him about the lights, about the footsteps, about any of it. "I thought someone was following me," I said. It wasn't exactly a lie. Mr. Morse frowned. "Following you? Another student?" "I don't know. Maybe." He moved toward the door. "Let me check." "No." I stepped sideways, blocking his path. "Please don't open it. Derek, if someone's bothering you, we need to report it. I can call the office." "It's okay. I think I was just being paranoid." Mr. Morse studied my face. I probably looked pale. My hands were shaking a little. "Why don't you sit down for a minute?" he said. "Catch your breath." I moved away from the door and sat in the front row. Mr. Morse went back to his desk but kept glancing at me. Outside in the hallway, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no voices, just the normal sounds of students changing classes. "Better?" Mr. Morse asked after a few minutes. I nodded. "Yeah, thanks. You want to tell me what really happened?" I looked at him. Mr. Morse was a good teacher, patient. He actually cared about his students, but there was no way to explain this without sounding crazy. "Someone was walking behind me," I said. "I got spooked. Has this happened before?" "No. First time." That was true. The other rules had been different. The mirror in the bathroom, the lights in the library, bus 47, the portrait. Those had been scary, but they hadn't chased me. This felt more aggressive, more direct. Mr. Morse checked his watch. "My next class starts in 5 minutes. You're welcome to stay if you want." "That's okay. I should go." I stood up and walked to the door. Mr. Morse followed me. "Derek, if someone's giving you trouble, you need to tell an adult. Me or Mrs. Patterson, or go to the office." "I will. Thanks." I put my hand on the door handle and paused. 10 minutes had passed since I'd run into the classroom. That should be enough time. I opened the door slowly and looked out into the hallway. Empty. Well, mostly empty. A couple of students walked toward the science wing. Normal pace, normal conversation. I stepped into the hallway and looked down toward where I'd been standing when the lights started blinking. The floor lights were steady now. No blinking, no pattern. Just the usual dim glow they always had. I walked back toward my locker, checking the floor as I went. Every light looked normal, like nothing had happened, but I knew what I'd seen, and I knew what had followed me. I grabbed my history textbook and went to class. Mrs. Patterson was talking about colonial warfare tactics, but I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about those footsteps, how they'd matched my pace exactly, how they'd gotten closer. After school, I waited by the main entrance. Students streamed past me, heading for buses or walking home. I watched for Carson's Letterman jacket. He came out about 10 minutes later, talking to another senior I didn't recognize. When he saw me waiting, he said something to his friend and walked over. "Hey, Derek, what's up?" I pulled the folded paper out of my backpack. "I need to give this back." Carson looked at the rules in my hand. His expression changed. "You experienced the 5th one." "Yeah, about an hour ago." "The floor lights?" They blinked in sequence, led toward the main entrance. I ran to Mr. Morse's classroom like the rule said. Carson nodded slowly. "Good. You followed it exactly?" "I didn't look back. I didn't help anyone else. I just ran." And you made it to a classroom? Yeah, locked the door. Waited 10 minutes. When I came out, everything was normal again. Carson took the paper from me. You did everything right. What would have happened if I hadn't? Carson was quiet for a moment. I don't know exactly, but kids who don't follow the rules, they transfer schools suddenly, or their families move away without any notice. Sometimes they just stop coming to class, and after a week or so, nobody remembers them. Nobody remembers them? It's like they were never here. Their names disappear from class rosters. Their pictures get removed from the yearbook. Teachers forget they ever had them as students. I stared at him. That's impossible. Is it? After everything you've seen here, is that really the most impossible thing? He had a point. The bathroom mirror, Mr. O'Connor in the parking lot, Bus 47, the portrait, floor lights that chased students down hallways. So the rules keep you safe, I said. They keep you here. They keep you real. As long as you follow them, you can survive until graduation. Have you ever broken one? Carson shook his head. Never, not once. And I'm not planning to start now. A freshman walked past us. Small kid, maybe 14, with straight black hair and nervous eyes. He was carrying an oversized backpack and looking around like he was lost. Carson watched him go by. Drew Mason. Started here 2 weeks ago. New student? Yeah. His family moved here from Moose Jaw. I understood what Carson was thinking. You're going to give him the rules. When I graduate, yeah, someone has to. Why him? He's smart, observant, and he listens when people give him advice. Those are the qualities you need, Carson called out to the freshman. Drew Mason? The kid stopped and turned around. He looked even more nervous up close. Yeah? Can I talk to you for a minute? Drew walked over to us. He glanced at me, then focused on Carson. You're having trouble finding your classes? Carson asked. A little. This place is bigger than my old school. It takes time to adjust. Listen, I want to give you something that might help. Carson held out the folded paper. Drew looked at it suspiciously. What is it? Some advice from students who've been here longer, things that will help you fit in. Like what kind of things? Just read it when you get home. Follow the suggestions. Trust me, it'll make your time here a lot easier. Drew took the paper. Okay, thanks. And Drew, when you graduate, pass it on to another new student. Someone who seems like they could handle the responsibility. Handle what responsibility? You'll understand when you read it. Drew nodded and put the paper in his backpack. Thanks again. He walked away toward the bus lanes. Carson and I watched him go. Think he'll follow them? I asked. I hope so, for his sake. Carson adjusted his Letterman jacket. You did good, Derek. All 5 rules and you're still here. Still yourself. How long have these rules been around? I don't know. The senior who gave them to me said he got them from someone else. And that person got them from someone before that. Could be years. Could be decades. And they work. They work. As long as you follow them exactly. I thought about the past few weeks, the fear, the confusion, the constant feeling that something was wrong with this place. Does it get easier? I asked. You learn to live with it. You develop instincts. You stay alert. But easier? Carson shook his head. No, it doesn't get easier. It just becomes normal. A bus honked its horn. Carson looked toward the parking lot. I should go. My ride's waiting. Carson, yeah? Thanks for warning me, for giving me the rules. Thank the person who gave them to me, and the person who gave them to him. It's a long chain, Derek. We're all just links. He walked away toward the parking lot. I watched him get into a car with 2 other seniors and drive off. I stood there for a few more minutes, watching Drew Mason board his bus. He looked like any other freshman, nervous, trying to figure out where he belonged. He had no idea what he was carrying in his backpack. I walked back toward the parking lot, watching Carson's car disappear around the corner. The taillights faded into the distance, and then he was gone. Just like that. I stood there for a minute, not really sure what to do next. The parking lot was almost empty now. Most of the buses had left, and the few remaining cars belonged to teachers staying late or kids in detention. The October air had that bite to it that meant winter wasn't far off. Carson was graduating in 8 months. Come June, he'd walk across that stage, get his diploma, and leave Riverside High forever. I'd never see him again after that. The thought hit me harder than I expected. He'd saved my life. Not in some dramatic movie way, but he'd given me those rules, and those rules had kept me breathing. Without them, I would have looked in that mirror longer. I would have left the library when the lights started flickering. I would have stayed on bus 47 until whatever happened to those other kids happened to me too. I started walking toward the street. My house was about 15 minutes away on foot, through the older part of town where the trees were big enough to block out most of the streetlights. I liked that walk usually. It gave me time to think. Tonight I had plenty to think about. Carson had carried these rules for 4 years. 4 years of watching for patterns in the lights, avoiding certain mirrors, checking bus numbers twice. 4 years of knowing something was wrong with our school, but not being able to tell anyone who'd believe him. He'd looked tired today, more tired than usual, like he was carrying something heavy. I wondered how many other kids he'd given the rules to over the years. Drew was probably the last one, since Carson was graduating soon. But there had to have been others. Kids who transferred in during Carson's sophomore year, his junior year. Kids who needed the warnings. I wondered how many kids didn't get the warnings. The thought made my stomach turn. I'd seen what happened when you broke the rules. The reflection in the mirror with too many teeth. Mr. O'Connor standing in the parking lot with his head tilted at that impossible angle. The boy on bus 47 with the cracked skull and the empty space where his brain should have been. Those were the lucky encounters. The ones you could walk away from if you followed the rules exactly. What happened to kids who didn't know about the rules? Kids who stared too long at Principal Blackwood's portrait? Kids who tried to help when the floor lights started blinking in sequence? Carson had said some students just disappeared. Their records vanished. People forgot they'd ever existed. I turned onto Maple Street. The street light on the corner was flickering, but not in any pattern, just regular electrical problems. I'd learned to tell the difference. My sneakers made soft sounds on the sidewalk. Somewhere behind me a dog barked once and then went quiet. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. I thought about Drew Mason, sitting on his bus right now with the rules folded up in his backpack. He had no idea what he was carrying, no idea that piece of paper might save his life someday. Part of me wanted to warn him, tell him to read it tonight, memorize every word. But Carson was right about how this worked. You had to figure it out on your own. You had to learn to trust the rules through experience. That was the only way it stuck. The only way you really believed. I'd thought Carson was playing some elaborate prank on me when he first handed me that paper. The rules sounded crazy, impossible, like something out of a bad horror movie. Now I knew better. Now I knew that Riverside High School harbored something dark and hungry, something that fed on students who didn't know how to protect themselves. I reached the intersection where Maple met Oak Street. My house was 6 blocks down Oak, past the old church with the broken steeple and the convenience store that stayed open until midnight. I'd been walking this route for months now, ever since we moved here from Regina. Back then, I thought the biggest challenge would be making friends and keeping up with a different curriculum. I'd been so wrong about that. The rules had kept me alive, but they'd also shown me things I wished I'd never seen. They'd opened my eyes to the wrongness that lived inside our school's walls. Once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Every day now, I walked through those hallways knowing what was hiding just beneath the surface. knowing that one mistake, one moment of forgetting or carelessness, could be the last mistake I ever made. Other students moved through the school like nothing was wrong. They used the second-floor bathroom near the gym without thinking twice. They rode whatever bus showed up. They stared at portraits and paintings without worry. They had no idea how lucky they were. Or maybe they weren't lucky. Maybe they were just living on borrowed time. I passed the church. The broken steeple looked like a pointing finger in the darkness, reaching up toward clouds that blocked out most of the stars. The parking lot was empty except for Father Mackenzie's old sedan. 2 more blocks to go. I thought about my parents, probably sitting in the living room right now watching the evening news. Mom would be grading papers from the clinic's health education classes. Dad would be reading the newspaper, still smudged with dust from the mine despite his shower. They had no idea what their son had been through these past few weeks. They thought my injuries from the bus incident were just clumsiness. They thought I was adjusting well to the new school. If I tried to tell them the truth, they'd think I was having some kind of breakdown. Stress from the move, maybe. Difficulty adapting. They'd want to get me counseling, maybe transfer me to a different school. The irony was that transferring might actually be the safest option. Get away from Riverside High before something worse happened. But I couldn't do that. Not when I knew what I knew now. Other kids needed the rules. Kids like Drew, who transferred in without any idea what they were walking into. Someone had to be there to pass the warnings along. Carson had done his part. 4 years of carrying that burden. 4 years of watching and waiting and following rules that sounded insane to anyone who hadn't seen what he'd seen. Now it was my turn. I had 2 more years at Riverside High. 2 more years of watching for new students who looked lost and scared. 2 more years of deciding who could be trusted with the truth. 2 more years of following rules that might save my life. The convenience store came into view, its neon sign buzzing and flickering in the window. The clerk inside was reading a magazine, probably counting down the hours until his shift ended. Normal life, simple life. I envied him. My house was just ahead now, the porch light glowing yellow against the white siding. Mom always left it on when I stayed late at school, a beacon to guide me home. I climbed the front steps and pulled out my keys. Through the living room window, I could see the blue glow of the television. Everything exactly as I'd pictured it. Safe, ordinary, real. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house smelled like Mom's pot roast and Dad's coffee. Warm smells, home smells. "That you, Derek?" Mom called from the living room. "Yeah, it's me." How was school? I hung my jacket on the hook by the door and thought about how to answer that question. How was school? Well, I watched another student receive rules that might keep him alive. I said goodbye to the person who saved my life. I accepted that I'm now part of a chain of warnings that stretches back years, maybe decades. "Fine," I said. School was fine. Because that was the only answer I could give. The only answer that made sense in this normal house with its normal smells and normal sounds. I went upstairs to my room and closed the door. My backpack sat on the desk where I'd left it this morning. Inside, in the front pocket, Carson's rules waited. I'd memorized them weeks ago, but I still carried the paper with me everywhere, just in case. I pulled it out and unfolded it carefully. The paper was getting soft from being handled so much. The creases were wearing thin. 5 rules. 5 simple warnings that had kept me alive. Tomorrow I'd go back to Riverside High. I'd sit through classes and take notes and try to look like any other student. But I'd be watching, listening, staying alert. Because now I knew what Carson had known, what every student who'd carried these rules had known. Some warnings should never be ignored, no matter how impossible they seemed. And I'd learned that lesson the hard way. one broken rule at a time. I folded the paper back up and put it in my desk drawer. Tomorrow I'd move it back to my backpack before school. Tonight, it could rest. I looked out my bedroom window toward the direction of Riverside High. I couldn't see the building from here, but I knew it was out there in the darkness, waiting. Tomorrow I'd walk back through those doors. I'd navigate those hallways and sit in those classrooms. I'd be careful and watchful and smart, because I'd survived something that claimed other students who weren't careful enough or lucky enough or warned in time. I'd survived, and now I had a responsibility, a duty to pass along what I'd learned, just like Carson had done for me. I turned away from the window and started getting ready for bed. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and with it, another day at Riverside High, another day of following the rules that kept me breathing.